Welcome everyone to Ilizwi Moja Africa. This podcast is a platform for young African people, particularly young African women, to voice out opinions about different topics from the African perspective in the realm of politics. So the idea is that when she speaks, we listen. As African women, we will tackle past and current events that have political implications. So yes, everyone, my name is Lindy Tembu from South Africa, or SLE for short. I'm an academic reviewer with extensive research on political science, particularly feminist theory and human rights. So we are joined by my co-hosts, Danielle from Eswatini, Harry from Kenya, and Ashley from Zimbabwe. So we are actually alumni of the Mandela Washington Fellowship, and this podcast is inspired by our time at the University of Georgia. So, hey, ladies, how are you? May you introduce yourselves?
Hello, Slee. My name is Danielle from Eswatini. I'm an ecologist, passionate about, climate justice, youth advocacy, and I have rather a strong academic background in conservation ecology. And I volunteer full-time for environmental organizations, both locally and internationally, focusing on, biodiversity conservation, climate change, waste management, and education for sustainable development. Because I believe that as young people, we should keep on advocating for the inclusion of young people in all these decision-making arenas. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Harry, you can introduce yourself.
All right, thank you so much, Lee. So, as you've heard, my name is Harry Munyazi, and I am a pastor, an author, a speaker, and a leadership coach. I run a coaching consultancy called Shuja Rising Consulting. Shuja is a Swahili word meaning brave, warrior, and hero, and that's exactly what I am about. I am passionate about inspiring people to be the Shuja that they were created to be. And I do this through coaching, speaking engagements, and through the books I write.
Yes, and then Ashley Muremba from Zimbabwe is our co-host as well. She is a media manager, so she's going to be handling a lot of aspects in concern with the media and just our social media networks as well. So I'm so happy that you all can join us. For our first topic, we will dive right into a juicy scope about strategic relationships. Now, when we think about strategic relationships, you could be thinking about an agreement between two or more parties. You know what that party can offer, and you know what you can offer to them. So you both benefit from that relationship. Those benefits could range from anything. One could argue that one party benefits more than the other, but this will be up for discussion. So we will be analyzing 3 subtopics from strategic relationships, which includes relationships between political figures, relationships and culture, relationships that have a power dynamic. But before we start, please follow us on Twitter at Ilizwi Moja to continue our conversations. You can ask any questions and we'll definitely come back to you guys. So when looking into the context of relationships between politics or between political figures, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma met Jacob Zuma in the 1970s, a time when both were living in exile. She became his second wife when they got married in 1972 and had 4 children. Now, the couple divorced in 1998, but have a cordial relationship since working as part of the same administration and government under Thabo Mbeki. Now, the question that I would like to ask you ladies is, if they are divorced, why does she keep her surname? So I'm just asking to any one of you guys to respond to this particular context. Why would she keep her surname?
I would say she keeps her surname because it has become part of her identity. She took on a new name. She was known as Mrs. Zuma for at least 16 years. Yes. So even after the divorce, I mean, maybe professionally she was known as Mrs. Zuma in her credentials, in her workplace, in her academics. So I'm just thinking, how easy is it to drop a name that you've held for 16 years? I don't see the problem with her still maintaining the name, even if she's not married to him.
Makes sense. And just also just what you're saying in your response, Harry, that it's such a common thing for her to just keep the name, especially because everyone knows her she's been associated with that name during her reign in ANC, and she continues to be associated with that name. And I just want to also pose a conversation here when it comes to the public and how they see the whole idea of her still keeping the surname Zuma. So what she said, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, is that when I got divorced, it was important to keep my children's identity. They stayed with the Zuma surname. They wanted to abandon it, but I wouldn't allow it. I've kept that surname for the past 20 years and I won't change it. So that was her response to the public questioning about her keeping the name, in that she felt that it was more in line with her children's needs by keeping that surname. And the public still referred to her, as you said, rightfully so, Harry, as Jacob Zuma's ex-wife. However, it doesn't even bother her. She finds that being referred to as an ex-wife is almost, patriarchal or sexist thing, and it kind of just shows how humanity still exists in a system of sexism. And so I guess looking into that, I would like to pose a question. Is she perhaps unbothered by the fact that she's still referred to Zuma's ex-wife because of the political benefits that she gains from her surname? So while running for president against deputy presidents at that time, Cyril Ramaphosa, she gained loyalty from Jacob Zuma's fans during the elections. So that could possibly be part of those political benefits as a result of keeping Jacob Zuma's name. However, you guys will debate on that. How do you feel about that particular discussion?
Thank you, Slee. I do believe that there is that element of sticking to that surname because of the benefits. Because I don't think that most women still keep their ex-husband's surnames if they're just like your ordinary Joe. But this one had like a political influence, which was very vital for her career development as well. Not to say that it was the only reason why she is a successful woman, but she knew the benefits of keeping that identity makes people like actually take her serious because of that linkage. And at the end of it all, I think keeping that surname definitely highly possible that it was because of those benefits of being married or being once married to such a powerful man at that time.
Sure, that's such a good point, Danielle, because in as much as they might not be at that time political benefits that she would have used in concern with, keeping that name, it could be for instance, for personal reasons, as she spoke about, with the sense of her children, she felt like she needed to do for her children, for their identity. However, as you also rightfully said, that it's not out of the picture that she could do it for political benefits, that there's a possibility of gaining some kind of benefits as a result of keeping the surname. So that's definitely a great discussion. Thank you so much, ladies. So we're going to move on to relationships and culture, which is a bit of a shift from what we were speaking about in terms of relationships between political figures. However, it's such an interesting dynamic to understand culture and understand how culture plays a role in our context. So we see that culture is an intrinsic part of someone's identity and beliefs. It is preserved and respected throughout generations. However, the relationship between culture and individuals has shifted as the world becomes more progressive and gender conscious. So bearing this in mind, what relationship do people have with culture in today's society? And is that shift dependent on age, gender, socioeconomic status? What do you guys think? What relationship do people have with culture in today's society?
I think people have a myriad of like varying relationships with culture. It depends on maybe where you grew up, because there are some people who they grew up immersed in culture. Maybe they grew up with the village, or in the countryside. And so culture was really part of their upbringing, and therefore they might value it extensively. Versus the person who grew up in town, cosmopolitan, and they're really removed from culture. As far as they're concerned, some of the cultural practices are archaic. They have no relevance, they're backward, and we should embrace civilization, which usually people equate with westernization.
Yes.
So I think there's a myriad of relationships that people have with culture depending on where you grew up, your background, how you were nurtured, or your own exposure. Maybe you're African, yes, but you grew up abroad, and by the time you're coming back to your own country, you have zero roots. You cannot connect at all with your culture. So I think, and also maybe it depends on people's view on culture, because mostly how it's African culture is portrayed in the media, it's like everything, all the culture in Africa is so barbaric, it's so backward, it's so last millennium. Like we really just need to abandon our practices for modernization, whatever that means. So it's the kind of like disdain. And, unfortunately, now most of the youth, we might take that view. Like those were archaic practices my grandparents practiced. It has no use in the modern age. So, those are different notions of how culture and relationship that people have with culture. That's my take on the issue.
And I like that you said that, Harry, that you found that there's a difference in concern with when you look into socioeconomic status, that's in rural communities, they might perhaps preserve culture versus in the more metropolitan sort of communities. And in the context of age as well, the younger generation, they're not necessarily involved in sort of cultural experiences, whereas the older generation is more inclined to preserve those kind of cultural experiences and stories and so forth. And I think when looking into the strategic nature of culture, and going back to what we see as strategic relationships and how perhaps one party benefits more from a particular context. Like, for instance, when looking into a situation of culture, maybe an older generation benefit more from preserving their culture. They feel more connected, for instance, whereas the younger generation don't exactly benefit from cultural preservation. When you look into people are sort of trying so hard to keep their cultural songs, their cultural clothes, their cultural foods, all those kind of things, you find the older generation feel this need because they benefit more from it, versus the younger generation don't exactly benefit more from preserving culture. So I think when looking into that, do you think there could be that sense of a certain party or certain group benefits from that relationship with culture versus another?
I come from a very cultural country. We really celebrate our culture and traditions and the likes. But what baffles me is that we are not supposed to question why we're doing some things, like why are we doing it like this? And I think that's where now the new generation is like asking those questions. But why do we have to do this when we can do that? And when you do that, or when you ask that, you are like labeled as someone who is, can't find a better word for it, but so disrespectful. How can you question how things have been done? I mean, they've been working for the past million years, so why are you questioning it? So I don't think at some point is that there is this relationship between the different age groups is because of other groups disrespecting, like the younger generation disrespecting culture, but it comes from the fact that we cannot question it and it doesn't make sense. We should be questioning everything. I mean, it makes sense to us. We want to know. We don't just want to continue with the status quo. So I think for me, I love culture, but there are some cultural practices that I really question, like, why should I be doing that? And it doesn't mean that I don't consider myself as Swazi enough, or I don't consider or don't respect my culture and traditions. But I just want to know, I have free will to think and ask and question some things. And I think that's where there's that disconnect between the different generations. On top of that, I do have this belief that culture has really suppressed women for the longest time. It's my opinion, because of how I've seen women being treated in terms of decision making, in terms of participation, being included in these different platforms. So I do believe that the younger generation should be questioning, and the elder generation should be explaining it to us, instead of labeling us as disrespectful or not being cultural enough.
There is a bit of a disconnect between the younger generation and the older generation for one reason. Like she said, maybe I just really don't see the relevance of this practice. Like, what does it mean? What are the roots? What are the origins? Or some cultural practices are actually harmful. Like in some parts of my country, Kenya, there's still an ongoing battle against FGM, female genital mutilation. It's illegal. It's illegal in the country, but some communities still hold on to that practice. They believe that's the rite of passage for women, but everyone knows it is harmful. So I guess there are those practices that for sure they really have no relevance in our society today. They've clinically, medically been proved to be harmful to the health of people, but we're still clinging on to them. But as much as I say that, I wouldn't be quick to throw out the baby with the bathwater, because there are also still some cultural practices which I believe in. In Africa, where there is a lot of respect for your elders and helping the needy and community, Ubuntu, those are African values. That's entrenched in our culture. So I guess the thing is, how can the older generation reconcile with the fact that times are changing, and some of the things that we clung on to, they were fine for that time, but they're not, time has for them has passed. So how can we kind of like work together, and also just the older generation being willing to explain what is this for, and being able to just be open-minded to listen to the fact that it worked then, but it doesn't necessarily work now. Can we form a new African culture, so that the new generation of youth can still feel African? Because it's not that we're proud to be African. We're proud of our individual cultures in our countries, but we also don't want it shoved down our throat, especially if we're feeling like the practices are totally out of date.
I hear where you ladies are coming from. I think what I picked up from the conversation is that it's having a culture that where you're able to ask questions, where you're able to also preserve the aspects of culture which we can all agree on is important, like what you mentioned, Harry, with respecting your elders, for instance, and also what you mentioned, Danielle, about bearing in mind of that culture can be flexible, that we can, let's just say, ask questions and also just sort of inquire about certain things, certain cultural practices that may not exactly, refer to us necessarily judging those practices, but just wanting to learn more about it and wanting to understand it, in order to see whether, is this a certain practice that I would necessarily follow. But as you said, it doesn't make you less of your culture, essentially. It just allows you to understand what those cultural practices are. And yeah, ladies, I fully agree with you all. We're just going to take a short break, and after that, we're going to tackle our next topic, which is going to be our closing topic, and it's going to be really interesting. We're going to look at relationships with a power dynamic. Okay, see you guys in a bit. Hey, thank you so much, guys. Welcome back. We are going to go right into our topic, relationships with a power dynamic. So when thinking about a relationship with a power dynamic, we're looking into, for instance, a context like the sugar daddy, sugar baby relationship, which we can all understand and relate to. The sort of blessy, blesser kind of relationship. So the motive of this relationship is to attain power. However, the repercussions are that the female or the blessee ends up forfeiting the morality. So the blesser majority of the time gives money in exchange for sexual benefits. But the deeper intention is not sex. In fact, the purpose is to rule or feel as if he has more power over the female. It is the idea that I am more powerful than her and she is powerless. And one can even argue that it's almost ingrained in this male desire to feel powerful. But do you ladies agree or disagree? You can agree or disagree that there seems to be sort of a skewed power dynamic in terms of this sugar daddy and sugar baby relationship, that it's more in favor of the richer individual, aka the sugar daddy, versus the less rich individual when you're looking into that kind of power dynamic. But what do you guys think? Do you think there's a sort of like skewed sort of, relationship in that one benefits more than the other? The rich individual, the sugar daddy, benefits more than the less rich individual, or rather the sugar baby. So yeah, I'm opening the discussion to you ladies. You can respond.
Let me just start. I think it's an interesting topic. I mean, like, personally, I believe that when you look at it from a high level, you would think that baby daddy has the power. He has all the power. But when you look at it from another level, like look at it from another angle, you realize that a woman actually has the more power, because the male usually is more, okay, the problem with most male is that they have these huge egos, and having this young pretty woman next to them makes them feel good about themselves, probably a woman that can never get in any other day. So I believe that the woman has the power because she knows the baby daddy's weakness. He wants to be seen as somebody who's got it all together, like walking around with the finest chick. So I think she has the more power because literally she can get anything that she wants, as long as that relationship is not violent in any way. I think, baby girl, you should continue with that relationship. I mean, why not?
Yeah.
You have all the power. You can tell you what to do. You have the power in the sense that you can literally walk out whenever you want in a more healthy relationship. I'm not talking about those really hectic ones whereby they are controlling, but that's the thing. The control comes from the ego being bruised. So technically, it's just power dynamics as we are actually discussing it. You just have to realize that you have your power, and this person can literally do anything that you want. So why not enjoy it whilst it lasts?
Right. I mean, if I'm getting paid, I'm getting the moolah. So if that is definitely, and she gets power from the fact that she benefits from it. If her benefits is that, you know what, I'm getting the sexual benefits myself, as well as the financial benefits. So how am I powerless? If that could be a sort of discussion on that, but that's actually that's really good points.
I just thought about what you just said right now. You said that she's getting a sexual benefit because oftentimes we seem to think that only the males get the sexual benefit, but hello, women also have sexual needs, and they actually get the sexual benefit from these relationships. So I just wanted to reiterate that. Thank you.
I love it. I love it. It makes a lot of sense. What you're saying, Glenita, is that it also goes two ways as well, where it's not just him. We also have, and it's funny because I think in society they don't uncover that aspect of femininity, that we do also enjoy that side of feeling sexually sort of full to an extent, and I feel like people don't acknowledge that. So that's such a good point that you brought up. So yes, Harry, what do you think about that?
I don't think I am with you on this point, Nile. I think I have a contrary opinion, and one from the start. Let me just I also want to flip the coin on its head. Also, that I know we're so used to the sugar daddy, sugar baby phenomenon, but now there's also the sugar mama and the platinum digger. So there's also that dynamic. Yeah, like there's some women who have money and they are willing to be with this young guy who's just going to do sexual favors for them. So there's also that dynamic. Maybe they're in it for different reasons, but I see today we're dealing with the sugar daddy, sugar baby. I don't agree with the fact that the woman has the power in this relationship. I think the power is definitely with the person who has the financial muscle. They're not on equal footing. If I am paying for a service, then I have the right to dictate when, how, what I want as far as sexual favors are concerned. And, the higher I pay, the more demands I'm going to put on you. And sometimes these sexual favors might be degrading to the woman, or she may just not want to do them, at that particular point for whatever reason, because she's not a sex machine anyway. She's a human being. She has her own feelings, her own. I mean, if she's not in the mood, she's not in the mood. But if I'm paying for a service, because basically that's actually what it is, the guy is paying for a service, then he has rights over the service provider. So I don't think that the woman has power in this relationship. She might try to turn the tables and maybe invest. There are quite a number of instances of women in Kenya who started out that way. They had several sugar daddies and they would get called even to different countries and they'd perform sexual favors for these men and get paid lots of money. And they started businesses from that. And then they stopped now being sugar babies and now just became full-fledged socialites and they have their own businesses and stuff. But I would just have to ask, what is the cost of that? I feel if the cost is your morality or dignity, then you're not in a place of power. You really aren't. So that's my 2 cents in that regard. And in most instances, I don't think the women, yes, they have sexual needs, but if my sexual need is dependent on what you want at your time, at your convenience, I don't think these women are always themselves pleasured by these sexual encounters that they get in exchange for money. And here's the thing, most of these relationships are usually with married men. Like these sugar daddies are never single. So at the long run, these women cannot even form long relationships, like long-term relationships, even if they wanted to. So how honorable is that? So that's why I'm not agreeing with Nile's point. I don't think they necessarily derive sexual pleasure. Neither do I think that the people in power. The person with the money is the one who most likely has the power because he can dictate or she can dictate what she wants, when she wants it, how she wants it.
I hear you, Harry. It's quite interesting because when you think about empowerment, what does it mean as women to be empowered? For me, I think it starts with you understanding yourselves. Understanding yourself and actually making a decision of what really makes you happy, what makes you feel like you are alive. And if it's finer things and if it's things that you are really have to work hard for and you feel empowered, because I believe that the power dynamics come from the fact that one feels like they are being exploited. So if you do not feel like there is exploitation going around, then you are a confident woman. Then you do understand that you are not being vulnerable next to this person. You just want basically make the person feel needed and appreciated, and it's going to move the whole world for you, just so to continue with this confidence. There's something powerful about women who know what they want, women who ooze confidence, and it literally alters with the man's ego. But at the end of the day, we live in a century whereby women wants to feel a certain way, women wants to be respected and all of that. So if you respect yourself, I do believe that to a certain extent, respect is subjective. So if you do respect yourself in whatsoever way that you feel you respect yourself, and you basically enjoy this soft life, yes, that's the word, this soft life, in exchange for stroking some rich guy's ego, and you experience all of these nice experiences for yourself, and you have somebody taking care of these lifestyles that you enjoy, I think you do hold the power at the end of the day, because one basically lives to serve the other, whether it's the woman or it's the man, but there is that sense of everyone doing their part in this relationship. And it is true that when there is a difference in the financial muscle, then there is that power dynamic, that power shift as well. But like I said, it's, for me, it comes from a woman being empowered and women understanding what she is doing, a woman not being forced to do what she is doing, because we're not talking about what do you usually
or like sex
advocate for?
trafficking.
Yes,
Those
yes,
kind of
yes. So
situations.
this is like a conscious decision that you make because you feel like this is the life that you want for yourself. So I think when you know what you're doing and you see the benefits and you're actually happy doing that thing, then why not? That's where the power comes from in the context that I'm talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. I see, Harry, you raised your hand there. Do you want to just...
Yeah.
Yes.
Nile, I'm just going to have to be devil's advocate. I want to just respond to two things that you've said. You've talked about empowerment and you've talked about respect. And I think I just want to crack that word empowerment wide open, because I think we have the wrong perception. I think we have the wrong definition of empowerment. And I think that's what has been pushed into the world. Like in the West, empowerment means I can do a nude photo shoot. I am proud of my body and I will show it. If I am an actress and I'm willing to do a scene that has nudity, then I am an empowered woman. Yet at the same time, those same women will lament that they're being objectified. So what is empowerment? Because I thought empowerment is, like you rightly said, I know myself, I understand myself. And then, that empowerment also intersects with respect. And I don't think respect is subjective. I think there's just a universal definition of respect. And respect is to do with dignity, it's to do with self-worth, it's to do with I value myself. I am a human being and I will carry myself as such. But how is a woman or a guy, because we said it can the blessee can be a guy or a gal. How is that individual who is the blessee basically allowing him or herself to be in a position where you will do whatever it takes for money, not necessarily sexual favors, because it's not always sexual favors, but how is that respecting yourself? I think we are priceless. I mean, you can't put a price tag on any human. So that concept of doing something for money, and so long as it makes me happy, that is not a sign of respect any more than somebody, whether it's a guy or a girl, on the cover of a magazine nude, still claiming to respect themselves. I think that's an oxymoron. That whole term empowerment and respect, I think we don't have it. I think the world has just twisted what it means. I don't think it's respectable to live off a sugar daddy or a sugar mama. I really don't. Why don't we just all get regular jobs? Because usually the reason why a guy or a gal would opt for that lifestyle, at least the few, because I know a few people who live that lifestyle, and when I ask them, they're not willing to put in the effort. They want a shortcut. We're thinking this is the easiest route to my dreams, or some even want to become socialites. Really, do you respect yourself? Really, are you empowered if you need to rely on somebody else instead of putting in the work hard to achieve your dreams? You're looking for a shortcut. Are you really empowered? That's the question that I have to ask.
I have a follow-up question. So how is it different then when a younger woman is married to an older man, like married? Obviously, I mean, not obviously, but let's talk about a very rich and successful man. How is that different? I mean, you just mentioned that when you are doing this kind of thing, this kind of relationships, then there's a certain level of disrespect. But because now you are married, then it is fine. How do we interpret morals, and who interpret morals for us? Who gets to say that this is disrespect? I'm talking about myself here. I want to wear shorts to wheresoever that I'm going, and someone will come and say, you are disrespecting your body. Who gets to tell us, or who gets to come up with these definitions of what is what? How do I go beyond morals? How do I, who has this measurement of what is beyond and what is below and what is right?
That's a good question. That's a good question, Nile, about the younger lady marrying the older guy, or it's even in the reverse. I think motives. It's just because they got married doesn't necessarily make it right. Like, why did you get married? If you married him for the money, I don't think that's right either, because your motives were impure. If you truly love the guy, power to you. As for who gets to decide on what is right and what is wrong, let me speak for myself. My guide is what I believe in. I believe in the Bible, so that's my moral guide. I am also cognizant of the fact that not everyone believes in the Bible. Not everybody will use that as a standard of truth or as a measure of what morality is.
I hear you, because we recently just talked about culture, and I was the one who was like, we should start questioning culture, because some of those things I think they're not right. They're not a practice that should be done to human beings. And those things, like when you look at, for an instance, we celebrate the reed dance in Eswatini, Umhlanga, and you have those, I don't want to say half naked, but they wear this very revealing traditional gear. And personally, I would never do that to myself, because I feel like, no, that is not right. My morals don't agree with this. And you have, but at the same time, you'll find me wearing a very mini short or mini dress whatsoever, something very revealing, and I'd be comfortable with that. So that's why I think some of these things are very subjective, like morals, respects, and that's where my mindset is at right now, because you cannot question why is someone wearing such a revealing traditional gear, but when I'm wearing whatsoever revealing modern clothing, if I may call it like that, then these people are going to say, why are you walking around like that? It's so disrespectful. You shouldn't be. You're too, you see, all of this now, it's very controversial. So I have that debate within myself as well, and I really like to know. Taking it back to you.
No, it's such an interesting conversation, and I love for us to just continue diving right into it, because I think what you were saying, Harry, is such a great point on morality. And we should at one point understand whether something is morally good, considering if somebody might be uncomfortable about a certain situation. And at the same time, Jamila, what you were saying about how do we assess morality when everyone's understanding of morality could differ? And that is, it's also such a great point to look into the situation that in the case of the sugar daddy and sugar baby relationship, it's not always clear cut of who's benefiting more. Perhaps it is clear cut. Perhaps there is an understanding of the sugar daddy benefiting more than the sugar baby, or perhaps there's a sort of mutual benefits. So that's something that is always up for debate. But I'm very happy with the discussion that we've had, ladies. I want to also put it out there on the floor if you guys have any questions from our previous discussion, or want to just add a few points in concern with our previous discussion on the other topics or this particular topic.
Thank you, Slee. I actually wanted to refer to the first one where we talked about where you kind of gave us the context of this podcast with strategic relationships, but the ex-wife of President Zuma. Right, that conversation, because I believe Nile said that to a degree, she might keep the name because it does have political benefits. I mean, who doesn't know the Zuma name? So if you have it, then opens a door for you. Of course, that is not the only reason that she might have kept it, if she kept it for that reason at all. I just like to highlight how, as an individual, even if she has that name, she's exceptional. Like, she had a role in the parliament, and she had a role in the African Union. Like, She's a formidable woman on her own. And I don't think just because that was her last name, that added to her character or her work ethic or her brilliance. Like, that is her, the individual. It just happens that she was married to, Jacob Zuma. Yeah, because how many other women cling on to the names of their famous husbands, but they have nothing to show for themselves.
Yeah.
They don't have, maybe character-wise it's lacking, or maybe they haven't just achieved something, and you don't have to achieve anything big. There are other women like Grace Michelle, she kept her name.
Yeah, true.
Or Winnie Mandela, and they're all exceptional women. They have made a name for themselves. They've done their own thing, aside from the fact that they were married to presidents. Grace Michelle was lucky to be married to 2 presidents, because sometimes the highlight is you're the ex-wife of the president, and we forget that as a person herself, she was amazing. So I just wanted to bring in that point.
Yeah, definitely, Harry. And I think that was beautifully put. And oftentimes in relationships, we tend to forget that our partners bring different things to the table. We want to have this discussion. But all in all, for someone to build a brand as a husband or as a wife, it's because they have that supporting wife along their side, or that husband along their side. So she has an entitlement to whatsoever benefits that surname comes with.
Yeah.
And I, like you said, it might not be because of the surname, but at the end of it all, the success of the husband or the success of the wife, it's highly dependent, or to a certain degree dependent on the partner that they're with.
Definitely. I agree with you, ladies. And I find that this discussion that we just had today is so rewarding. And if one of you guys would like to continue with our discussion, please definitely talk to us on Twitter. And as mentioned, our Twitter account is @Ilizwi Moja. We definitely would love to be in contact with you guys so we can continue our discussion, and so we can be able to just continue also having this podcast as well as we look into various other topics. And with that being said, thank you, ladies, for everything. Thank you for such a fruitful discussion. Just very happy that we're able to start off this wonderful podcast and that we can get going. Thank you, guys.